Huh. You know, this past December was a big month. I mean, for me personally, I had some big life events that happened. And the holidays are like their own beast. And then on top of all of that, as a movie guy, I felt very obligated to check out all of the movies that came out in December. And there were a lot. And for some reason, they all came out at once. Sort of. On the same day, we had both Kraven the Hunter and Lord of the Rings. On the same day, we had both Sonic the Hedgehog and Mufasa. And then as a special Christmas treat, we had the gothic horror film Nosferatu. Some of these I was more excited for than others, because some of them looked a lot better than the others. But all of them I really wanted to check out because I was very interested in how they were going to turn out, and especially so I could share it all with you guys. It was a crazy and cluttered month, but we're here now, so enjoy these quick little micro reviews of all the significant stuff that came out in December. Good grief, how are there 3 of these Sony Spider-Man spin-off spum movies all in 1 year? Every one of these has been terrible, and I'm so glad they've decided to pull the plug on them. And it looks like we got our bland finale with Kraven the Hunter. And I say bland finale because, I gotta admit, I don't think it's as terrible as people have said. It's just aggressively mediocre, because the others felt insulting with how they adapted their characters. Venom being ridiculous, Madam Web being unlikable and stupid, and Morbius being Jared Leto. Kraven is just kind of whatever. I mean, okay, he's a pretty backwards adaptation of the source material. They took an animal hunter and turned him into an animal lover who hunts men who kill animals and do other crimes. It's another example of a studio not being willing to just let a straight-up villain be the protagonist. But it's a fine enough setup for an action hero. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that if you separate this from the source material, it's actually a pretty unique action movie. Still not good, but it's got its own identity. It's an alright movie for some teenage boys or some drinking buddies to have fun with and then forget about later. Maybe it's just because I really like the African savanna wild animal kind of vibe myself, but I liked Kraven enough as a character, even if I'll admit he wasn't that interesting. He had cool outfits though. I dug every costume that Aaron Taylor Johnson put on. But fashion aside, he didn't have much character growth. I'd say his supporting cast had more growth than he did. They were trying to make his relationship to his father and his brother the centerpiece of the film, and unlike the other Spum movies, I could still feel the effort they were putting, or trying to put in to make it interesting. Still just didn't land though. I will say though, it was kind of refreshing that the plot wasn't another end of the world scenario. It was just him trying to rescue his brother. I like that smaller scale. But if you're gonna make it more personal, you gotta make us feel something for these characters. And the most I felt was, that was kinda cool when he fought the big Rocky Rhino nerd, I guess. So, I gotta say, Kraven the Hunter, more like Kraven the Midter. Currently, I'm slowly working my way through the Lord of the Rings books for the first time. I've finished The Hobbit and Fellowship, and I've just started on The Two Towers. I say all this to let you know that I'm pretty new to the Lord of the Rings franchise. Also, I'm a pretty casual anime fan. But when I heard that there was going to be an anime movie set in Middle-earth, I thought it sounded cool. So, I got myself a ticket, and I sat down to see The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. And I had a pretty good time with it. It's not a super unique story. There's some familiar themes of revenge and war, all that you usually see in fantasy films. In fact, I wouldn't even say I really got all that wrapped up in the story or characters. But I really enjoyed the presentation. It felt so good to see a 2D animated film in theaters. That's so rare these days, and really has been my whole life. I was born into the generation that already had 3D animation dominating the industry. But on top of that, it also felt cool to see some theatrical animation that was aimed straight at adults. That's even rarer than 2D. This art is just so beautiful to look at, and it's rendered with so much detail. And it's also very ambitious. There are times where I'd say the animation does look quite a bit off, and it's because what they're trying to do is just very difficult, and they were probably rushed. But I have to appreciate the hard work that clearly went into it. However, like I said before, I do wish that this story and these characters were just a little more engaging. There were great and memorable moments, and I liked these characters well enough. They weren't boring or anything. But the story of an ex-lover that's seeking revenge on the main character's father and her mission to defend her kingdom, while it sounds cool on paper, just fell short of being totally gripping for me personally. My fiance ate it up though. She's a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and an even bigger fan of any romance story with ex-lovers, so she had a good old time. So I'd say if you like this franchise, or even if you just like anime, or you just want to see something unique compared to most of the stuff that's coming out these days, you'll enjoy your time. But overall, I'd say The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, more like The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim mid. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is interesting. While I was watching it, I was very aware of the fact that the majority of the line deliveries were just a little off and awkward. How all the scenes were choppily edited so that conversations flowed weirdly fast. And not a cool Sonic kind of fast. Just all these consistent flaws that should have added up to make it hard to watch. But here's the thing. I don't care. I don't care because despite all those flaws, this movie is such a genuinely fun adventure. And it's fun that's balanced out by a dark edge. By kids' movie standards. I know it's cringy to point out how edgy Shadow the Hedgehog is, but they play him just right in this. Sonic has always been perfectly upbeat and adventurous in these movies, and I think they nailed making Shadow the perfect foil to that. It's all summed up with one line in the trailer.
Shadow's story began a lot like yours, Sonic. But where you found family and friends, Shadow found only pain and loss.
As soon as I heard that, I knew this movie was going to be cool. Because there's just something special about a character with a tortured past that learns to grow beyond it. And they pulled that off great here, with some great themes for a kids movie. Themes all about choices, especially how you choose to let the hardships of your past define who you are today. Sure, it's executed a little clumsily, like the other stuff I mentioned, but it's done with so much heart. And not to mention fun characters that work great off of each other. Okay, they may overindulge in Jim Carrey shenanigans a bit, especially with two of him this time. But hey, he's still funny. The positives just outweigh the negatives here. Like, how can I be mad about the editing when I'm too busy having a blast watching Sonic and Shadow zip across the screen while they're playing Live and Learn from the words of yesterday, and then they do the pose! Anyway, all that is to say, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, more like Sonic the Gas Hog 3. Live and learn! You know, I'm usually more lenient with the Disney live-action remakes than most people. But man, Mufasa the Lion King is not good. And what sucks is that there were things about it that made me at least slightly hopeful. Like they got Barry Jenkins, director of a Best Picture winner. And Lin-Manuel Miranda, his stuff is usually pretty good. Usually. But man, something got lost here, because this whole thing is so boring. The idea of making a prequel about Mufasa, and making the story to where he wasn't born into royalty, but earned his way up to it, is one that's open to interesting possibilities. And the sad part is, I really did feel those possibilities here and there, but they rushed through them so bad, and we ended up with just a dull story with a dumb conflict. There's these evil white lions, I wonder why Disney would have a problem with white lions, who just want to kill any lions not in their pride. And they go to absurd lengths to follow the main characters, just to kill them for only that reason. And this is all done with just these flat, one-note characters. They bring in some new characters, and there's nothing interesting about them, they're just there to drive the story. And there are returning characters, but they're either just as dull or way different and more annoying than their previous versions. For example, Scar, or Taka. This is the second movie this year about two best buds that are destined to be enemies. The first was Transformers 1, where they turned on each other because of their different ideologies on what to do about the oppression they faced. In this one, it's all over a woman. I hate it when interesting ideas get dropped for romance plots. They took the question of, why is Scar so evil, and answered it by basically just turning him into Snape. It's so lame. And to top it all off, the music and animation is lame too. The songs just feel like standard Lin-Manuel stuff. Nothing really stands out. And I know people have been memeing on the Brothers song.
What did you say about my brother? That's not a trait, that's my brother.
But the worst one to me is the villain song that he wrote, because it absolutely does not match the villain's personality at all. He goes from like, there can only be one Lion King.
There will be one Lion King.
To, I'm gonna make you go bye-bye.
I make you go bye-bye. I make you go bye-bye.
It just sounds ridiculous. And as for the animation, it's much worse than the last film. That at least looked realistic most of the time, but it only really has that effect some of the time in here. But either way, it's never nice to look at. It's usually pretty ugly. And the characters' faces are slightly more expressive than last time, but not by much. To be fair, none of these details are outright bad, just really bland, really boring. This whole movie is boring. The only thing that is outright bad is the framing device. This whole movie is a story that Rafiki is telling to Simba's daughter, and the whole time Timon and Pumbaa keep interrupting the film we're trying to watch to tell some stupid jokes and fourth wall breaks. Yeah, we've got painfully unfunny fourth wall breaks in The Lion King now. They're straight up talking about the Broadway show, and these characters that are supposed to be wild animals directly mention screen time and legal teams. It's so stupid. So, I gotta say, Mufasa the Lion King, more like Mid-Fasa the Lion King. What is going on? Nosferatu is an incredible movie. It's yet another Dracula movie, but it's a darn good one. Throughout the entire first half, I was amazed at how engaged I was through every second. Even with little to no dialogue, I was still following along with the story just fine, and I was super invested in the fate of the main character and his wife. Everything was just so moody and atmospheric. It was one of, if not the most cinematic experience I've had all year. But the thing is, I am just talking about the first half so far. Don't get me wrong, the second half is still exceptionally good. But once Nosferatu, Count Orlok gets off his little boat, it started to lose me story-wise. It felt like there was a lot going on and not much going on at the same time, and I just kept checking out and losing the plot a lot of the time. Part of that, I think, is because there's just a few too many characters by the end. In the first half, all you're focused on is Nicholas Holt's dealings with Count Orlok and the freaky goings-on with his wife back home. But in the second half, Craven and his wife and kids get involved, and he hires a doctor who hires a Van Helsing, and also there's a Renfield. It's just a bit too much, and the structure could have benefited from some simplification. But the great thing is, this big cast of characters is portrayed by a group of actors that are giving great performances. Nicholas Hoult is great as always. Bill Skarsgård has another great performance as a creepy movie monster. Willem Dafoe is great in everything he's in. But most of all, Lily Rose Depp is very impressive. The things she has to get across with her character are complex and weird, but she absolutely nails it in every scene. So it's tough. If the second half was as strong as the first, I'd call this my favorite film of the year. But as is, the performances still pull it through, even where the story is sorta lacking. So, I gotta say, Nosferatu? More like Gasferatu. Well, that was all the movies that I watched in December. But what did you guys watch? What did you like? What did you dislike? Let me know in the comments and... Okay, who keeps flickering the lights?
Nosferatu!